The authorization of skill-based games for gambling purposes presents arguably the greatest opportunity for innovation in the casino industry since its establishment. From eSports to slot machines, developers and publishers alike are jumping on the skill-based games train. With laws regarding games of skill being relaxed, the opportunities to create skill-based games are becoming more enticing for game publishers. This video will discuss two different aspects of development. One, the differences between skill-based games and gambling, and two, how to avoid common development pitfalls. Creating a game where players bet real money is exciting and could potentially earn a lot of money for the developers, but it's important to be informed and not run afoul and accidentally create a gambling game which could get you in trouble with the law. Games of skill, by definition, are where the outcome of a game is based on physical or mental skill rather than by chance. A great example of this is chess, where the placement of each piece is predetermined and each move is made by the player. On the other end of the scale, a game of chance is like a slots machine, where you can press a button and the machine randomly selects what the outcome will be. Some games lay somewhere in the middle of a murky legal status, such as poker, where the cards that are dealt are random, but a player's skill also greatly impacts the outcome of the game. In order for your game to be considered skill-based, all players need the same opportunity to win, without being affected by chance. So the game can't incorporate mechanics such as the roll of a dice, a randomizer, prize wheel, etc. With chess being on the skill-based side and slots on the random, the more your game eliminates chance from the outcome, like chess, the more likely your game will be considered skill-based. For example, with poker, even though it's generally accepted that a professional poker player will do better over a tournament than a beginner, the cards in the deck are randomly dealt to each player, which means a lesser skilled player has a chance of winning against a higher skilled player. This chance is generally why poker is not considered a skill-based game in the eyes of the law and is regulated accordingly. There is no general legal definition throughout the entire United States that determines what a skill-based game is. Instead, statutory and case law often refers to the dominant factor test, material element test, and any chance test. A game is considered gambling under these tests if the game involves chance and a prize reward. However, the chance element is evaluated differently under each test. The dominant factor test is where the outcome of a game is overwhelmingly dependent on the skill level of the player. If a skilled player beats an unskilled competitor at least 75% of the time, that's a skill-based game. A material element test determines whether chance is an important component to determine the outcome of a game. As an example, in games like Minesweeper, a great deal of skill is exercised by the players, but there are moments when the players are forced to guess at random, with the results of the guess determining the winner or loser of the game. Skill predominates, but chance plays a material role in determining the game's outcome. A few states adhere to the any chance test. This means that a game is considered not skill-based if any element of chance affects the outcome. As virtually every game has some element of chance, most skill-based games will not survive scrutiny in these states. In order to be considered a skill-based game, the law generally requires you to answer yes to these three questions. Does the game require payment of an entry fee, yet no amount of that entry fee contributes to the prize? Does the prize amount stay the same regardless of the number of participants? And, is the game operator or anyone associated with the operations not able to compete? To manage legal requirements, you may be required to certify identification, address, and age checks on all users, along with geolocation detection to ensure the player is old enough to play and is within the region where it is legal to do so. Lastly, terminology plays a role in determining if a game is considered skill-based or gambling. If you use words generally related to gambling, then you're more likely to be considered a gambling game. So instead of using words like bets, stakes, and wagers, use alternatives like challenges, entry fees, cash tournaments, and contests. The first method to protect yourself is the most obvious. With a number of hacks occurring in recent years, it's important to encrypt all user data inside your databases. This is to ensure that if anyone were to break into your server, that the user data would have a second layer of protection. Likewise, any data that comes to and from the server should be encrypted and decrypted accordingly, so it doesn't get intercepted and modified before it reaches its destination. Anti-cheat measures should be put in place to further protect yourself from hacking. Some of the ways to do this are: Add a timer to the player's response and measure how long it takes for that player to respond each time. If it is a fraction of a second, or an exact amount of time each turn, then that player is probably using a bot to play. Add a second layer of encryption. For example, if a player's score is 2033, your encryption might look like this, but you could also add a few characters to verify the number of digits, like this, where the $sign represents 4 digits in the score. If someone modifies the score to be something like this, then your second layer of encryption would detect that there were only 4 digits in the score and flag it as questionable. Handle as much of the game logic you can on the server side. The client side, what the player sees, is much more vulnerable to hacking than any code placed on your own server. There are apps that can be used to bypass in-app purchases. Basically, they tell your app that the purchase has been confirmed without it actually being approved by the app stores. One way to combat this is to verify the transaction has been confirmed by the App Store by querying the server after confirmation rather than relying on the initial response. Another method to combat these problematic apps, at least on Android, is to detect if any of these apps are installed on the player's device. If they are, assume they are interested in cheating and don't let them play. Utilize code obfuscation, which prevents people from decompiling and modifying the client code to benefit them in the game. In the end, these are just some of the measures you can take to defend yourself. With new hacker tools becoming available regularly, it's more of a cat and mouse game than a surefire bet. Some say there is no true way to protect yourself 100% from a determined and skilled hacker, but you can put enough roadblocks in place to make it more difficult.